And welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, coming to you from the mothership of paranormal programming, the X Zone Broadcast Network. And here I sit tonight, folks, in my office in the Southern Command Post of the network in beautiful Vero Beach in Fellsmere, Florida. Really happy to be back with everyone. The weather's finally gotten warm down here. We're enjoying South Florida weather again. And tonight got a really special show for you. Tonight we have Dr. Brandy Stark. Dr. Stark earned her bachelor's degree in history and the classics from the University of South Florida, where she also holds a graduate degree in religious studies. Dr. Stark earned a second graduate degree in humanities from Tiffin University in Tiffin, Ohio, and she also obtained a doctorate degree in leadership and education from Barry University in 2010. She is currently a full-time faculty member at St. Petersburg College in St. Petersburg, Florida, teaching religious studies and humanities. Dr. Stark started her research into the paranormal as an undergraduate at the University of South Florida. After writing and presenting papers at academic conferences, she started to research local urban legends and ghost stories. With the guidance from experienced paranormal investigators, Dr. Stark began conducting her own investigations. In 2004, her interest in animal ghost stories emerged as a result of her creation of a website devoted to the dogs, Pugs. Through that website, she became involved in the production and hosting of a podcast devoted to animals and the paranormal. In 2007, her investigative research team, Spirits of St. Petersburg, was born. Her current paranormal focus is an academic approach to studying ghosts. Dr. Stark works to present the face of reasoned and compassionate behavior in paranormal investigations. Dr. Brandy Stark, welcome to Paranormal Stakeout.
Thank you so much. You are my date for the evening. So, happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, Dr. Stark. You know, I'll tell you, I've been involved in the field of paranormal research for a while now, and we've all come across stories and discussions of seeing animal spirits. But I don't know if that's something that the rank and file work on very often. And here you are. You've actually focused on the study of animal spirits. Got to ask you, what are they? What is a dog ghost?
Well, that is where things get interesting. So there are a couple of different theories. One is that animals, particularly pets, are conscious. You know, they have developed self-awareness so that when they do pass on, they are still able to manifest as an entity, as a ghost. I've gotten numerous reports of dog ghost stories, believe it or not. Dogs and cats, of course, are very, very common and the most commonly reported. The second theory that I have kind of dates to Freud with his writings on mania and melancholy, where he actually believes that ghosts are projections of grief, that we are actually producing them, almost like a tulpa, perhaps, like the Tibetan idea. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, because I tend to go with the idea that animals are aware, and the research is now showing up saying that, yes, animals are cognitive, they are thinking creatures. But I just find it really a fascinating field. And right now in the United States, animals have become so important. And I remember posting this article not too long ago, but they did a survey of people and asked who would you rather spend time with, and the overwhelming answer was their pets, which I think is interesting. Not other people, and I totally get that, but their pets. So I think that there's a new attachment, and people want to know that their animals go on, that someday we'll be able to see each other, and that this is not the end for their pets.
So are you saying that animals have souls? Because much of the discussion around involving the ghosts of humans, if you will, are that they're projections of their souls. So do animals have souls?
And that's, oh my, that is a sticky wicket for religious studies. So in Hinduism, for example, yes, you have the Atman. The Atman does go up and down in the cycle of being. It can be human, it can be animal. In Buddhism, you have for lack of a better term, a subsubtle mind that can incarnate as an animal and can incarnate as human. And in fact, since the last time we spoke, I did talk to a lovely Buddhist monk a little bit more about animals and their consciousness and reincarnation. And it was actually pretty interesting that animals who have better karma end up as pets, because what humans can expose them to are spiritual practices, different forms of awareness, which actually allows these animals a higher chance of incarnating as human in the next life, which I think is interesting. But Buddhism, it's not a soul per se, so that gets into a complicated idea. Judaism says that animals have shared souls, like a horse herd might have a single shared soul, which I think is quite fascinating. Mm-hmm. But in the West, usually we're going to find Christianity and Islam kind of a little more conservative. God blew his breath, if you will, into Adam and brought Adam to life, and so there's a very specific element to that idea. So if we go back to saying something along the lines of maybe animism, something like the indigenous ideology that all of nature has a soul or spirit, the animals, the trees, the earth itself, then I think we're kind of starting to move into that realm. Honestly, I think we'll find out if animals have souls someday. We'll find out if we have souls someday. But it's kind of a hard thing to definitely say from a religious point of view.
Well, I think we run into that problem in all aspects of paranormal investigation. So much of it is spiritually attached. So little of it is scientifically attached. Have there been any studies on the souls of animals returning? And why dogs and cats? Why not? They talk about so many other different animals having a higher level of intelligence. Whales, for example. Mm-hmm. So why just dogs and cats?
Well, and see, this is where things get interesting because, quite frankly, in this country, we are definitely meat eaters, and we slaughter a great deal of animals every year. So why aren't we hearing about pig ghosts or cattle ghosts or chicken ghosts? And again, this is where the support tends to be more towards perhaps human projection, because we don't identify with those animals the same way that we identify with pets. So that gets to be a kind of another big issue. Now, there are some whale ghosts, but you find those, for example, in Japan, and they tend to be
really?
There's kind of this is really cool it's a ghost of a skeleton whale, which is even better, right? And so it was reported along with this kind of hurricane, this tremendous storm, but I got to say, I've been looking around. Sometimes people ask me things like, well, how come you haven't done a podcast on reptiles? And to be honest, I have heard one person say that they thought they saw a ghost of their turtle, but that's it. I haven't heard anything else. I am not a psychic or a sensitive. It's funny because folks will say, well, what are you? And I'm like, I'm an academic. So there you go. But it's been interesting because, this is where I have grown up with pugs. I adore them. It's why I have the Paranormal Pugs page. And yet, to date, none of my pugs have ever shown up, but I saw one of my pet rats after he died. So was that really grief? Was it an expectation? Because this rat was totally awesome. His name was Shadow, and he was one of the most intelligent pet rats I have ever had. And as you can hear, I've got pugs playing in the background. But anyway, and I really have no way to account for it except to say that I saw the movement. He used to kind of run in a certain area, and I saw this movement turned, and I saw him sitting there very clearly, and I kind of looked again, did a double take, and there was nothing there. That's been about as close as I've gotten. But I think, again, it's the association with animals. We are not living with cattle, goats, and sheep, but we are living with cats, dogs, and pocket pets.
Well, and you discussed a few minutes ago a projection. Give me a clear definition of that. Are you talking about we're almost projecting our desire to see the animal again, hence we think it's a ghost? Is that where you're going with that?
That would be one theory, yes. And I think that's Freud's theory as well, this element of grief and sudden separation from our loved ones, right? So we repress all of these emotions and we drive ourselves insane. You got to love Freud for that. That's a very general interpretation. I love and hate Freud depending on the day. So, but I think that is something. I have found people who are just so attached to their animals, and they can be really grief-stricken and overridden when, for example, their pet hits an element of disease that they have to be put to sleep. Mm-hmm. And I have met individuals who are so desperate to know that their pet is okay on the other side. They clung so desperately to this animal that, sometimes in those cases, I kind of think it is a projection that somehow, their mind is kind of compensating for this. And I find it really interesting because we've become so attached these days that there are actual pet grief groups now. So, I think in some cases it is, but in other cases I've met folks that are very sound, resigned, but let the animal go, or the animal passed away of natural causes, and they've reported cases very unexpectedly. Getting ready for bed, their dog would have this ritual of jumping down and going to drink water from a bowl, and you would hear the tag clink against the bowl every night, and then the dog would come back and go back to bed.
I've got to interrupt you here. We're about ready to go to our first break. Folks, you are listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network. This is Paranormal Stakeout. I'm Larry Lawson, tonight with Brandy Stark. So, folks, stay with us. I've got a few more questions to ask regarding ghost pets. So stay with us. We'll see you on the other side here.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Gwilda Wiyaka's latest book, The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1, is the first book in a series based on her writings that open every episode of the Science of Magic radio show. Drawing on the subject matter of each guest, and armed with over 40 years' experience in shamanism, 35 years in alternative health, and degrees in psychology and religious studies, Gwilda introduces relevant and leading-edge information that supports spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Rich with wisdom and inspirational quotes packaged in digestible segments, this is a book that will pull you from cover to cover. It will also serve as a daily inspirational reading for years to come. The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1 is available at our website, tsompublications.com, amazon.com, and wherever fine books are sold. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X-Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X-Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Dr. Brandy Stark. And I was remiss, Dr. Stark, wanted to make a note of your website, spiritsofstpetersburg.com. So, folks, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Dr. Stark and her team, Spirits of St. Petersburg, hit that website. Getting back to our previous conversation, have there been any scientific studies? I mean, this is kind of a new field. Heck, we can't even get our heads totally wrapped around the phenomenon of human ghosts.
That's correct.
But have we done any types of studies? Has there been any work done by the scientific community on this topic of animal spirits?
Not on animal spirits per se, and I tend to agree with you. Right now, even the field of parapsychology it's kind of diminished. I do believe the only place at present where you can get a parapsychology degree is in Edinburgh. So, and what people don't realize, because I actually looked into getting one at one point, but there's a lot of physics involved. I mean, it's a mix of science and psychology, but unfortunately, the best thing that I can say is the studies that are coming out from multiple universities being published in Nature, Science, Scientific America, Psychology Today, on animal consciousness. There we go. It's been a long day, sorry. But the element of animals being cognizant of numbers, of multiples, of textures, of compassion and empathy, emoting, figuring things out. You know, we tend to anthropomorphize, I think, other creatures, and I think humans are fairly arrogant. We like to say, you know, we're truly special and beyond, you know, the animal realm, which is kind of unfortunate in some ways. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been a lot on animal ghosts. I think it'd be interesting, but unfortunately that would go into animal experimentation, and I'm not sure how I feel about that one, other than usually pretty negative. So, but animals are sometimes used with paranormal investigations. I know I have two pugs that I take out. Now, I always have to put this asterisk here, and this may upset folks, I don't know, but I tend to be pretty honest because I have to kind of toe a line, particularly an ethical line. But paranormal investigation is a pseudoscience, and it is kind of a mixture of some scientific understanding and kind of a folkloric awareness.
Agreed.
So, okay, anyway, but animals get to be kind of interesting because they go all the way back. Animals sensing ghosts is certainly a cultural phenomenon that we find back to the Greeks and the Romans, particularly dogs as ghost sensitives, if you will, as are cattle, horses, and sheep, which I think are pretty interesting, herding animals that kind of spook for no reason. But there are accounts of dogs witnessing ghosts or announcing the presence of a ghost. It kind of is a more or less, you know, it's kind of a fairly strong phenomena that ghosts and dogs end up kind of becoming linked in liminality. So the idea is that canines have the supernatural sense of smell. They seem to be attracted to decomposition, which, you know, is a little bit creepy, but and they eat the dead. And so in the ancient world, you know, the concept kind of evolved that you are what you eat. So dogs kind of become associated with the dead. And so we start seeing dogs as guardians. The three-headed dog of Hades that keeps the living out of Hades and keeps the dead in Hades, you know. So we've got that element. We've got the Zoroastrian bridge. We've got all sorts of things where canines are present. So the best I can say with animals and perhaps forms of study, even with the paranormal field, even as a pseudoscience, you can at least say that there's a common methodology. But, you know, taking pets on paranormal investigations. I have taken my pugs on some, limited amount. I only have 2 pugs that go. They have grown up with me. And on several cases, they've actually been quite useful. However, I also don't force them onto the property. Have permission to bring them. I know where the emergency vet is because I'm just paranoid. Nothing can happen to my babies. And, you know, it's been pretty interesting because the other problem here becomes interpretation. So the interpretation is me as a pet owner. I know how they've grown up, and I know their behavior, so that when they stop clowning around and suddenly get very serious and stare at a spot, that we start getting EMF and we start getting temperature drops, then I can say, yes, it's very unusual. But at the same time, that's not hard science.
No, it's not. Let me ask you this question, too. So you're getting hits on your equipment. The dogs start acting strangely. Are you documenting this somehow to kind of correlate all the activity?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually the cases are marked, or they end up as Paranormal Pets episodes at some point. And in fact, I'll plug a quick little event. I don't celebrate Valentine's Day. I celebrate Valentween, because I'm creating my own holiday, which is a second Halloween right around Valentine's Day. Candy is candy, so we're good to go. And this weekend we actually celebrate Valentween by doing ghost tours at a local antique store, which we have documented for multiple years, I think since 2014. Absolutely has entities. There's one who is so charming because he drops the temperature for us. It's really cool. And there's no AC on. I mean, obviously we've checked for all this. But we've investigated. I took the pugs on 2 of these investigations. We did record everything. But I'll be darned if they were not drawn to the spot and the location, having never been there, where one of the entities regularly resides. If they didn't do that just once, but a couple of times, right around the same time that we're getting temperature drops in EMF. And I think we actually got that documented on audio for the podcast. So we've got that type of documentation where I can go back and say, here they act up, here we've had equipment, we've gotten something. My favorite is I still love this, Odysseus, who is now 12. He was, I think, 4 at the time. We were investigating a vet clinic, of all places, where the original veterinarian had passed away. He had sold his practice before he retired and passed to this younger man who is absolutely a charming vet, but he seemed to be still on premises. Like, they would hear odd noises and footsteps, and he was still keeping an eye on his property. Even though it had already been remodeled and had been restructured once, he was still showing up in the back area of this place. So I had permission, brought the pugs, took them off their leashes. It's a vet clinic, you're pretty safe. They're not, going into any dangerous areas, but we were videotaping, and this was back in the day, again, when you had a Sony Handycam, and it was very boring to watch hours of a door, essentially, because I was told about one of the doors, so I set up my camera, and I just let it run while we were there. And eventually I start seeing this pug, my little pugs start running by, and I'm like, oh, look at them, they're so cute, because you're watching video of a door for 2 hours and nothing's happened. And it kind of was entertaining. And they disappear, and then it's a period of silence, and there they come again. I'm like, oh, look, there they are, that's so cute. The third time, one of them actually stopped, Odysseus, looked at the door, looked at the camera, and that was totally weird to me, to actually see him stare directly at the camera. I mean, I've never seen him do it. He didn't do it any other time. He looks at the door again, and then he just turned and he walked away. They were goofing off. They were being very silly. And right after that, the door opened. It opened about 4 or 5 inches. We were documenting other areas. We're trying to keep track of the air conditioning, making sure it wasn't that we were all inside, all the doors were closed, that this wasn't a pressure shift. It did not happen for the rest of the 3 hours, and the pugs never acted out again. But the unfortunate thing is, because it's a business, the owner said we could not release the information, and I understand that, so we never did. But it was phenomenal. I mean, it was just one of those things that was so neat.
And I agree with that. You don't want to release information on a place that's allowed you to come in. But what did you do with this evidence, Doctor? I mean, you had an event there that sounds pretty interesting. Where's that evidence today?
It is on a miniature video camera recorder that sits in my closet, I'm sorry to say.
Okay. And that's kind of where I'm getting at. If we're going to, and didn't mean to interrupt you there, but if we're going to start to put this sort of thing together, we need to get the evidence in a spot where people can examine it and go back, maybe recreate the event a year later and see what happens.
Well, that's where, with other cases where we do have permission, like the antique store, definitely knows. I mean, they're open about being haunted. I've written about them. That's where folks can do that. But as somebody who is, again, an academic and a professional, I have been very strict that if we're investigating a private home, people should not be able to identify that house. I mean, it's not fair to the homeowners. And unfortunately, and I don't blame, the business for this, but, I mean, would you take your pet to a haunted vet clinic? I mean, we might, but this was kind of right before a lot of the TV shows came out. Technically, I actually started doing paranormal investigations in 97. And the Spirits was actually formed and named in 2000, and we became an LLC because it turns out the world is really strange and crazy in 2004, just for essentially protection, and if people needed, some sort of backup or, if they wanted to report us, we were an LLC. I mean, it was some comfort for the homeowners. But, it's unfortunate. I still know the owner, but...
Hey, Doc, we have got to take our next break. Hate to interrupt you again, but this is the X Zone Broadcast Network. This is Paranormal Stakeout. I'm Larry Lawson with my guest tonight, Brandy Stark. And when we get back, we got a lot more questions. Stay with us, folks. We'll see you in just a couple minutes.
Broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond. You're watching the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Demo.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, tonight with my guest, Dr. Brandy Stark, and we've been discussing quite a bit about the animal spirit world, but Dr. Stark, you also do standard paranormal investigations with good old human ghosts too, I guess, right?
We do. We actually do urban legends as well, so we try to track down the origin of a legend and see if it's true or not. So we've got the Florida Urban Legends page, but yeah, we've done... I think over 20 years, I've done about 400 cases because it used to be really active. But things have slowed down considerably lately. I think kind of oversaturation of the field and television, and there's been a lot of competition. And I tend to not be a sensationalist, so I'm not going out to scare people. So
that's good.
I sometimes think that's held against me, but that's okay. I mean, people do. I was told, actually, ironically, by a psychology student, that people like a narrative that they can follow. So they want to know that there's somebody that's been using the Ouija board, and there's a portal that's open and it can be closed. And I thought, well, okay.
That's not me. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, how did you find yourself? I was noticing in your bio you were at the University of South Florida, great institution here in Florida, and it was through the presentation of papers and your work you started heading into this field. Kind of lead me through what got you to where you are today with Spirits of St. Petersburg.
Well, actually, I started reading about religions. I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and I started reading about religious studies. Oddly enough, when I was 8, they actually had a section on mythology, and I just thought it was the greatest thing. And as I grew older, this kind of started to expand out, not just spirituality and religion, but also the supernatural. So the books I read as a kid, if you remember these, they were actually a mixture of paranormal. So you would have a chapter on UFOs, a chapter on ESP, a chapter on Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and then one on ghosts. So, that was kind of how I got started. And here's the irony: as a child, I'm an only child, so there were no siblings. There were and the pets liked my mother better. So I would be alone at night, and I'd be terrified after reading these books of seeing ghosts or Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster. But over time, it kind of calmed down, particularly when I was able to take it into an intellectual realm. So from an academic point of view, I can say that ghosts serve the purpose of community expression, of cultural expression, either of the fear of death, the expectation when certain death things are matched, women who die in childbirth showing up as harmful ghosts because they're a mixture of life and death energies. They're unnatural. So I could actually kind of take these ideas and study them, and in an academic context, you can have the passion, but you don't have the fear. It's very invigorating. Okay. So I started doing papers. I think my first one was on Homer and ghosts. The bard Homer from the ancient Greek culture. In fact, I still give a modified presentation on this in my classes. He actually helps to define the afterlife because the Greeks did not have a solidly defined, I knew I could do that, afterlife until we really get to Homer. I mean, there's kind of this collision of ideologies, but Homer gives it, this kind of tangibility. It's literally Hades, and you can sail into it, and you sacrifice some animals, and the ghost drinks some blood, and you get stories. It's awesome. And then actually my first thesis was on the role of ghosts in Roman religion. So as Christianity formed and kind of rejected the idea of ghosts, you had the Roman culture, and part of that rejection is separating out from the pagan culture, so Christianity trying to find its identity. But the Romans had some awesome ghost stories, and that was fun. So, I researched Mesopotamia and the Egyptians, and it just kind of kept going. Started hitting the Victorian and the modern era. And then I worked at a library, USF library, and they had a book called The Tampa Bay Triangle by Captain Bill Miller. And it was the first thing I'd ever seen on our area. So I read through this multiple times because I was actually in tech services, so I got to see all the new books. And I'm also an artist, so, You can't just be pinned down to one thing. You have to work 24/7, so it's great.
Okay.
But I actually had an art show that I was doing. I had several pieces, and it was an October art show, and the gallery owner said, well, why don't you do a talk on ghosts, because you find this interesting. So I did. This was right around 2000. It was early 2000, I think. Oh, no, late 2000, my bad. And ultimately, this couple came up afterwards, and they said, we're really interested in ghosts, too. And at this point, I had gotten in touch with several prior paranormalists, the 70s and 80s generation paranormalists, and we would discuss things, particularly because the internet was around and you could email people. And they actually were retired. He was a retired engineer, and they were house inspectors. So they had all of the equipment. I was still a poor grad student, so it really worked out really nicely. So we ended up kind of forming the Spirits of St. Petersburg as a group. I had been doing my own investigations before that, which really you're not supposed to do. But I did investigate. There were a couple haunted locations on campus, and I started writing about USF ghosts for the local newspaper, and it just kind of really bloomed from there. And
let me interrupt you. You said
sure.
You're not supposed to do it that way. You're referring to investigating alone?
Yes.
Okay. Explain that.
It's not necessarily because of the ghosts, it's because we live in Florida. So usually the idea of investigating alone, I tend as a single female to, at least like to have somebody with me in case of an issue.
Okay.
It was wonderful having a group because I tended to focus on the equipment that I had in my hands, and a couple times they were like, if you keep walking, you're going to go down some stairs in a really bad way. So you actually have somebody to help watch out for you. We were also going into people's homes. So we would be contacted and we would go to these houses. And again, you just don't want to do that alone. You want the homeowner present for an investigation. Usually if they have other adults present, that's okay. I usually kind of say if you have kids, you might want to send them out because we don't want to leave an impression or upset them. But it is up to the parent. It is their discretion. Mm-hmm. But, it was just mostly a safety factor for me.
Okay.
These two were very reliable. The other nice thing is if something does happen, and you have to understand, when I first started, digital cameras had square discs, those 4x4 floppy disks, if you remember those. Mm-hmm. They saved 12 pictures at a time, and they went through batteries like crazy. They were also very expensive. So for me, it was much harder to document. I mean, I only had limited areas of documentation. When you have a group that goes, at least you have multiple perceptions of an event. So if something did happen, it's not just my word. Right. At least, there would be a couple of others who were also present who saw it happen. I also used to go through equipment very rapidly. Early digital cameras could not sustain my use, unfortunately. They would break. I think I went through 30 cameras in the first 10 years. It was ridiculous. And again, when you're kind of climbing through the ropes of education, that was a cost consideration. But
absolutely.
It was fun.
Well, let me ask you this. You're an academic. You've taken an academic approach. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes.
Sure.
But you've talked about the history. You've talked about the literature. You've talked about the classics. Tell me, Dr. Stark, what do you think a ghost is?
I think they exist. I really don't have
a question. Okay, but what are they?
Now, I tend to differentiate. I think that the spiritual world and of course this is all personal, so keep that asterisk with it, but the supernatural and the natural world, I think, do overlap one another. And I think every now and again when conditions are right and things happen, you get a connection between those worlds, which is the liminal state, where the supernatural is in the natural world. And I've done enough and seen enough that unless this is an entire fluke that not only fools me, but fools people with me and homeowners, they exist. So I think that they are disembodied personalities. Okay. I think there are more spirits than ghosts. The idea being that they cross back and forth. Oftentimes I find it's family. But there are ghosts which are kind of those things that are trapped, that are meeting certain expectations that are not ready to cross over, often with a negative mindset or anger or fear. And we've encountered some of those. I try specifically not to deal with anything demonic or angelic or elemental, because that starts getting into kind of this metaphysical realm.
Let me get you to back up for just a quick second here, because you're saying, correct me if I got this wrong, they're spirits, they're not spirits. What disembodied? What is a disembodied person? Is it a spirit? Is it their soul? Do they go back? It would probably
be a link between the soul and the personality, so the soul and the mind. In fact, in the 90s, because it was the rise of the PC, I don't know, I found it funny, but I decided that what we were going to do is actually have a PC term for ghosts, which was the corporally challenged, right? They did not have a body. So these are disembodied personas, mixture of soul and mind energy. Most religions will give us kind of a trifecta, the body, the mind, and the soul. So I think it's two of those elements that continues to interact with this world for various reasons.
Do we create our own ghosts, in your opinion?
You're starting to move into the Tulpa region. So Tibetan Buddhism, yes, kind of says you can create them. We've also seen, I think it was the Philip Project was one. I thought there were two, and I can't think of the second one, but where you actually had a group, and this was, I believe, in the 70s, where they were allegedly able to create a spirit.
Okay. I got to interrupt you because we're getting ready to go to our last break. Hate to do that to you, Doctor, but folks, this is the X-Zone Broadcast Network. I'm Larry Lawson of Paranormal Stakeout. Stick with us. We got Brandy Stark and more questions to ask. See you in a few minutes.
Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes. finds a locket or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
And welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. Larry Lawson here with my guest tonight, Dr. Brandy Stark. Dr. Stark's website, spiritsofstpetersburg.com, all one word. Visit that, learn more about her group, and her studies. I'd like to encourage you all to also take a look at the terrific programming on the X-Zone Broadcast Network at www.xzbn.net. Some terrific shows on there that will take you through all the facets of the paranormal, from Bigfoot to ghosts to UFOs. So do check out our website. Dr. Stark, we've got so many more questions, so little time.
That's it.
I want to talk a little bit about, we've discussed ghosts, and I'm still interested to hear a little bit more about your philosophies and ghosts, but I also want to talk about the future and the direction of paranormal research and investigation, because I think we're at a crossroads right now. And I've read some of your things, and you seem to have some very specific opinions on that. So where do you think we're headed?
The good thing about being, multiple degrees and many years in the field, I have to say I heavily question my role right now in paranormal research. When I first started, it was still kind of cutting edge. It was here in the 60s and 70s. It kind of dipped down in the 80s. It was coming back in the 90s, I think in part due to the millennium fever, right? So folks are getting curious about the apocalypse and Y2K, and, it was part of a rise of expectation. So I kind of got involved with it at that point. When the television shows came out, I have to say I kind of felt almost personally invaded in some ways, because we started getting investigations where folks would say, well, are you part of TAPS? Where are the cameras? We want to be, and I'd have to explain, no, we're not part of TAPS, and there are no cameras with this. And what I have seen more and more is a generation coming up with these ghost shows, 2004 to 2018. I mean, that's 14 years now, in which people are being educated not by experienced investigators of the past, but by television. And television, the problem is that in the late 90s, scientists came together because these shows were starting at that point, and they actually had these shows reclassified not as scientific shows, but as entertainment. And what I don't think folks realize, and you can research this about the shows, but number one, they're very cheap to produce, relatively speaking, in comparison with other TV shows. Number two, they are entertainment, so they are looking for ratings and excitement. But what I have been hearing from kind of the really serious investigators is that these shows are so formulaic, that you see something is about to happen, they cut to commercial, they come back, and it turns out either they couldn't prove it, or it was, somebody was tripping and they found out what was happening, that they were set up in such a way as to try to create an emotive response rather than an intellectual one. Today, I think its appeal remains with kind of a fringe movement. And that's where I'm starting to really question, because the voice of reason, the voice of, non-excitement, working with the dead is already unusual, but you don't have to be afraid of it. I'm not saying poke at it, but fear doesn't resolve things. So what I'm starting to see now are fairly interesting conspiratorial, we're actually invaded by UFOs, the aliens are here, flat earth, anti-vaxxers, and religion or pseudo-religion, pop religion, has kind of really inundated the field. I just did a book signing yesterday. I have a little book out, but self-published, so nothing that exciting, but it's there. And this young couple came in and they said, well, we've been looking for a group, but they're religious. They talk about demons and everything's demonic. And I have to say, well, that's kind of based on the King James treaties that came out in the 1600s. Where if you're not in heaven or hell, then you are going against God's order, so you must be demonic. That's King James. He's the one that does this. So, this is kind of what I'm seeing, and
let me ask you this. Do you purport that perhaps folks that found themselves relevant in the world of ghosts are trying to maybe reinvent themselves by connecting? You mentioned aliens, by connecting aliens. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
In all honesty, I think number one, we haven't proven ghosts, despite all of this interest, despite everything else. There is no scientific landing for this. So that's kind of an issue. So there's been all this effort with some results, but not the desired results that would actually make this buildable into a more academic or more scientific or engineering-based approach. So that's one. Two, it is kind of repetitive. You go in, you look for something, you see if anything happens, you review video, you review audio, you go back, and sometimes you get something, sometimes you don't. For me, I find it's like 5% of the cases that you get something really awesome. Otherwise, it's kind of like, oh, well, this was an interesting case. It was interesting. But we didn't have lights turning on and off like we did that one time, right? So the excitement level isn't there. I have had a team for 20 years, and let me tell you, folks they think that you're going to solve their issues, that you're going to contact their dead sister for them. And I'm like, it doesn't happen that way. So I think folks are trying to reinvent or reconnect or find a different way to utilize this type of research. So I am pretty concerned. I find myself very heavily questioning if I should remain in the field. The paranormal pets is certainly one area of study which I find quite enjoyable, but I'm not a fearmonger, and I don't believe in presenting ghosts as fearful. One thing I think I might like to get into are kind of the family manifestations. There are some beautiful stories out there of families showing up in dreams. This would be like a crisis apparition that comes to convey a message, be it this is where you'll find the will, or I'm okay, or I still love you, and then really you don't have contact much after that. It's kind of a significant visit, and then that's about it.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this then. And I understand what you're saying, and I think part of the problem is we've become very stagnant in the field. We're using variations of it, but it's still basically the same types of equipment. I was asking you earlier about evidence and what you've done with it. And it sounds like you've accumulated a lot of it. But here's my issue, and I think this is where we can move forward. Evidence, career in law enforcement, evidence is evidence. We use evidence, sometimes it's 20 years old, to help make a case later on. Granted, you may get the same stuff over and over, but have we collected the evidence, cataloged it, categorized it, and examined it based upon later investigations to find the similarities, almost as if we're tracking a serial type of criminal, if that makes sense.
And it does, and I think it's a great idea.
But isn't that where we need to go? If we're truly in this, not to get the excitement from the bumps and the bangs at night, but truly to find the answer, sometimes it does get boring, but cataloging that information and using it later on to compare with other cases.
Exactly.
Would you agree that's the answer?
I do. And in fact, depending on how you do it, it could even sit with a form of qualitative research in which the investigator is the instrument. So you can actually start codifying that data. You're quite correct. It's what I had to do for the dissertation, where you start looking for themes. And I don't think that's a bad idea. And in fact, what I try to do with my cases is on the Spirit site, you'll actually kind of see what we found. Now, I did strip down the archives quite a bit because it was getting to be a huge site and there was all this stuff on there. But But I still have the original reports, and I think that would be truly, truly interesting. And
so you've actually written. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Have you actually written reports on your past cases?
Every case that we go on, I usually have every investigator submit a report about what they experienced, the readings they got, where and why, their conclusions. And I do compile them, and I've compiled them into articles, but I also keep those reports. Sometimes I will actually post them as is. So, I warn folks, I'm like, look, these reports are going to be posted, so if there are any typos, they're going in. So make sure you're editing. But yes, I think that's a really viable option for us. Now, here's the problem. Who's going to do it? Yeah, that's a time-consuming element, and that has to be something done by the truly passionate who really want to see this evidence. But I think it's a great idea. I do.
Well, unless we start doing that, and we're working towards that goal right now, unless we want to push this field to the next level, if we want to push it to the next level, I should say, this is what we need to do. You've probably got some terrific evidence in there, but has anybody been able to see it? And I don't necessarily mean the address, but simply the evidence and all of the things that came with it. The temperature, the weather, the solar, whatever, all the different things that come with that event needs to be examined and needs to be available so people can compare it. You would agree?
But I agree, but here's the other issue. How do we get the paranormal field to go for that? Because there is no standard canon. That's the other thing I actually have to explain. There is no standard methodology. There's no laboratory experience. So we'd actually have to get a group together.
You know what, Brandy, I wish we could talk more, but we are getting towards the end of the show.
Okay.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com, or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.